There was something about the confrontation between Donald Trump and the media at an epic news conference this week that boosted the tensions to a new level as the candidate announced nearly $6 million in donations to veterans groups, donations that had been questioned by the press. And he got some pushback from those covering the Trump Tower event, such as CNN's Jim Acosta and David Martosco of the Daily Mail.
It seems as though you're resistant to scrutiny, the kind of scrutiny that comes with running for president of the United States.
I like scrutiny, but you know what?
You're raising money for veterans.
Excuse me. I've watched you on television. You're a real beauty.
Is this what it's going to be like covering you if you're president?
Yeah, it is.
We're going to have this kind of confrontation in the press room?
Okay, yeah, it is going to be like this, David. If the press writes false stories, like they did with this.
Many in the media defended their profession and said the Republican nominee had gone too far.
It is our job to ask questions, particularly of public figures, especially somebody who wants to be the leader of the free world.
I do think what Trump is complaining about the news media here, targeting him on this, I don't think they're targeting Donald Trump. I think they're asking very basic questions.
We're going to get to the press conference next, but it showed Donald Trump at his thin-skinned worst.
Joining us now to analyze this battle between Trump and the media, Heidi Presbella, senior political correspondent for USA Today. Gail Trotter, a commentator and contributor to the Daily Caller and The Hill. And Molly Ball, political reporter for The Atlantic. Heidi, Trump has spent a year complaining about the dishonest media. Do you see this, though, as a significant escalation of his battles with the press?
I did, Howie, and I saw it as, just watching this as a reporter, a turning point, both for Donald Trump and for the media. On Donald Trump's behalf, he's called us all of these things before: disgusting, dishonest, unfair, but that was before he even got through the first question. And why were we unfair? In his words, because you made me look bad. And I think the media, for their behalf, was looking at this and saying, we're just fulfilling our most basic duty as journalists. You took a pledge, you made it in a very public way, and in the context of a campaign, we couldn't get answers, we investigated, and now you have a problem with that.
So a more aggressive stance by the media?
Yeah, I think that the media will look at this and say, okay, it's time to do more than just point the camera and give free press. It's time to do more of that basic journalism and fact-checking.
Gail Trotter, does Trump have a point that, from his point of view, he tried to do something good, raise money for veterans groups, and instead got bad publicity?
Yes, no good deed goes unpunished, right? And I think the reporting here by the press is swallowing the camel and straining at gnats. There's a Rasmussen poll that showed that 47% of likely voters think that the media is biased against Trump, and only 23% of likely voters think that the media is biased against Hillary Clinton. And we haven't seen the same type of zeal of the media going after Hillary Clinton or covering the fact that she had this email server, this homebrew email server that she said was protected.
It has gotten a lot of coverage, has it
not? No, we were all over the IG report.
Not to the same zeal. I mean, here Donald Trump has confirmedly raised $5.6 million of donations for veterans groups, and he's being punished for it.
Well, Molly Ball, journalists say it was the Washington Post that prodded Trump because his own personal $1 million donation and some other donations didn't go through until right after the paper published or was about to publish its story. So where do you stand on this warfare or this skirmish?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, this is a political tactic for Trump, attacking the media, and it's one that has brought him success so far. Certainly Republican primary voters have no love for the media, and voters overall, people overall. The press is a very low-rated institution in American society. I disagree with the idea that we haven't been aggressive about Hillary and with her emails, but I would say, at least Trump is having a press conference to address these. How long has it been since Hillary Clinton had a press conference? And so what enabled this one-on-one combat between Trump and the press is the fact that he is subjecting himself to questions. He is extraordinarily accessible to the press that he so loathes. So there's a bit of a symbiotic, I think, love-hate relationship there, but he didn't have a leg to stand on in this thing. He hadn't even given out the money or given his own money that he said he was given until he got called on it.
You have plenty of time to answer the questions. Actually, I know the media organizations that were following this for several weeks and trying to get an answer, and it was only when they couldn't get an answer that they decided to investigate.
But is there a circling of the wagons here? Because here we are covering a story that's about our profession. I've seen journalists, we played a few, go on the air and say, this is terrible for Trump to be whacking us, and he needs to move on, and he needs to pivot. At the same time, our profession is so widely distrusted on the left as well as the right.
Yeah. Well, how I look at, I get it when we cover stories about 20-year-old phone calls or delving into his romantic history. It just kind of plays to that sense among his supporters that the media is unfairly picking on him. But in this case, I think it is pretty black and white. Like I said, it was a public pledge he took, and he did it as part of his campaign. And the anger that we're seeing both by Trump and, frankly, by a lot of the people who love him and support him just makes me feel like, is there an underlying problem in terms of just not understanding civics, basic civics, and the role of the press in this country?
Well, Molly, since Trump specifically went after ABC's Tom Llamas, said you were that sleazy guy over there, his question, Llamas' question at that presser, you said you raised $6 million. Clearly you had not. Your critics say you tend to exaggerate. You have a problem with the truth. Is this a prime example? That might be an aggressive question, but is it an unfair one?
We should always be aggressive, and we should be aggressive toward everybody. I didn't think, and it's not the first time he's singled somebody out either. I've been to multiple Trump rallies where in front of his thousands of supporters, he points at individuals in the press pen, calls them out by name, calls them all kinds of ugly names, and that's borderline provoking people against a reporter. I think part of the reason that people are so negative toward the press, to Heidi's point, is that candidates on both sides love to attack the messenger when they don't have the facts on their side.
Let me try this on you, Gail. I think journalists secretly love these attacks. Not that we like being called names and vilified, but it's a juicy story, and it's a story that involves us, and we're narcissists. Right. And so if it had just been a defense of the veterans' money, 24-hour story. Instead, a week later, we're still debating Trump, the press. Did he go too far? Has he gone too far with others? What do you think?
Right. Well, it's gotcha reporting, and I think that the press loves it because it's this back and forth that creates a lot of excitement. And as I've said repeatedly through Donald Trump's year-long campaign, he loves a media firestorm. He's the opposite of a typical politician. He thrives on that. So these types of back and forth resonate with millions of American voters who feel like the media bullies a lot of people, and they finally have someone who's an effective response to the bullying of the media.
Just briefly, so you say gotcha reporting. You don't see any legitimacy to the question of what happened to this money?
Absolutely not. And the hypocrisy of the press not going after Hillary Clinton for real national security, life and death issues just really underscores.
Which was on the front page of every major newspaper.
We're going to talk about
we were all over that IG report. And I spent my whole summer reading every single one of her emails and writing about them as well. So I just strongly dispute that we're not covering this.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about Hillary in the next segment, but let me just put up on the screen CNN Chiron, as we call it in the business. This is the lower third banner. While Trump was speaking here, Trump, I never said Japan should have nukes, parentheses, he did. And that was an attempt at real-time fact-checking, which I kind of like, except that you lose all the nuances when you have to do it in 7 or 8 words. What Trump actually had said a couple of times was that maybe Japan would be better off if they defended themselves against North Korea with nuclear weapons, not that he wanted it to have. That might be a fine distinction, but it's a distinction that's lost in there. All right, let me move on to this. In that news conference, we showed it at the top, Donald Trump was asked, is this how you'll treat the press as president? And I thought he would deflect, I'll be more president. And he said, yeah, that's exactly what I'll do if I see stories I think are unfair. And he's talked about loosening the libel laws. So does that, I don't know, raise the stakes a bit?
I mean, clearly, at least as far as the media is concerned, the pivot's not coming. And again, let me just, for everything that I've said, I think this is a smart strategy for his base to go after the media. Those numbers, I think a lot of them come from Republicans who believe that there really is a liberal media bias. But I also think that I'm trying to picture a year from now, he's in the Oval Office, we come in, we ask him some basic questions about his policies, or we question a decision that he made, and he calls us disgusting, dishonest, and unfair. And I just think at some point, that's not going to be a novel, fresh strategy anymore.
Let me put up on the screen a couple of headlines, one from the New York Times. This has to do with the Trump University case. If we have that graphic, there we go. New York Times, Trump could threaten U.S. rule of law, scholars say. Washington Post, not just another Trump vendetta, attacks on judge by potential president, alarm legal experts. Now let's stipulate, a lot of even Trump supporters say, that maybe Trump going after this judge in the Trump U case, who was born in Indiana but whose parents are Mexican, was not a great thing. It was in fact troubling. Does that justify these papers saying legal experts say, Times says, Trump shows contempt for the First Amendment, separation of powers, rule of law, electing Mr. Trump as a recipe for a constitutional crisis?
Well, we didn't see any breathless reporting by the New York Times when President Obama decided through his executive orders to undermine federal law through actions on immigration, gun control, religious liberty. So here we have the headline that you just displayed saying that the declarations of Donald Trump are a threat to the rule of law. But we don't see balanced coverage when President Obama does similar things that threaten the rule of law. We had 25 smackdowns of President Obama by the Supreme Court, 9-0 decisions where they said that President Obama had overstepped his bounds. Well, we don't see that type of deal in reporting.
In that Times story, way down in the piece, it did mention Obama's executive orders on immigration. Molly.
Well, I think it's our job as journalists to reflect the conversation that's happening wherever it's happening, whether it's a conversation in academia. If you cover legal scholars and this is what they're talking about, you write that story, but you try to make it a balanced story. The liberal media conspiracy wasn't writing these stories about Mitt Romney being a potential threat to the fabric of United States society. I think there's something about the Trump candidacy that is provoking these conversations in academia, and that's what that's reflecting.
All right, let me get a break. Let me know what